Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to, I believe this is the third installment in the painting that I'm doing. It's a still life painting that I'm doing from life, and I put the reference photo up. Hopefully, everybody can get a good view of that. And if you'd like to download the photo, just put it in the chat or let me know, and I'll make that available for you. But really, what this process is all about is just kind of seeing the painting through those middle moments of the process, which are so awkward and can be so kind of daunting. And I think that just seeing the process can help beginning, intermediate students really understand like what's going to happen and best ways to organize your thoughts around painting. So I will begin shortly, and I'm just going to basically just kind of talk and tell you what I'm thinking about. But if you have questions along the way, please do let me know. And we'll look at the painting for a moment. And like I always like to do, I like to kind of think about my goals and next steps. And, you know, stepping back from a piece is so helpful when you're starting out. And we just kind of want to think about where we are. I'm going to turn the light on my still life subject. There we go. And hopefully all is well with sound. I'm just going to double check. So, about that order and about that process. Hold on one second, just stand by. I just want to make sure everything's going. All right, good. All righty. We've kind of done this block-in layer last week. There was like a base color of acrylic paint on the white canvas so that you're not painting on white. And then I kind of went through with a transparent thin mix of paint with some odorless mineral spirits and kind of washed in this compositional study, which I've now gone back and like almost filled completely with paint, but there are plenty of like empty spots still. This is still the underpainting, lots of underpainting in here. And while I kind of like the way that looks right now, it cannot stay. And that almost has to be our first priority to get rid of that unpainted surface by filling it with paint. Now, as you might know, if you've watched my live streams of painting before, I always talk about how I start with a thinned out consistency of paint to draw and reestablish the value pattern. Today is not going to be any different than that. So, alrighty, let's see. I just want to make sure I'm not getting like, I think I've got a frozen camera on my, one second, everybody. I'm so sorry. The palette camera does not seem to be picking anything up. So I'm just going to reset that one and we'll see if I can. Probably going to see the top of my head momentarily. Okay, there we go. We got it back. This should be good. There we go. I think everything is moving as it should. I was just like mixing paint and I know I did not see my hand moving. So glad I caught that. Please do throw in the chat if anything goes awry. So mixing with a transparent color allows you more working time for your picture. If you are starting out with a nice thin, transparent, and like just light, lots of, terp in that, or when I say terp, I'm typically talking about like an odorless mineral spirit like Gamsol, to thin the paint out and to give it that transparent quality that is so easy to work into. Now I have mixed this little bottle, which is just a, like a little squirt bottle. In that squirt bottle, I have mixed my odorless mineral spirits and I have mixed my linseed oil. And I like that mixture enough But I also feel like in the very beginning of a painting session, I might want to thin it down even more. And this terp is, let's see how colorful that is. I think it's clean enough to use. I'm going to use the terp at the top that has settled. The paint has settled down. And it just creates like more of a flow. This is kind of a dark purpley brown. It's more blue over here, more red over here. And it's really moving. And I've got like a lot of it on the brush, and I've got a towel in my other hand. And now I'm going to kind of think about what I'm actually doing with all of this paint. You would think I might do that in the other order. But no, I do know that I want to draw through, and I want to reestablish the value pattern. And this is an area right in here that I feel needs a little bit of development. And I can do that development with this nice transparent mixture of paint. There's this beautiful like reddish highlight or reflected color, I should say, through here. I want to draw so that I'm including some of that amazing, like, I love that teal color from the background. And I want to try to bring some of that into the bottle. So I've just taken some of that real estate from the background. And now I'm just kind of putting these little accents, dark marks. They might help me clarify things. I am in no way, shape, or form drawing a line around everything. I'm more thinking about like the shape of light and shadow, and I'm trying to get more specific at this stage. More information, but that does not mean line. That does not mean we want to flatten everything out, because that's not what we want. Oh, no, no. Now, there are no cherries here. Maybe I should put them. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. I want this to be messier than it's turning out. I don't know. It's just not free little thing there. I'm going to kind of mess this up a little bit. I don't want this to be the same level of focus. I just want to use the elements over here to create movement in. So you think about, how long you want to have the viewer linger in each area. That's the importance of each area. And so where you want to bring the viewer through, there are areas that I feel like are just like supporting roles, in the painting or in the composition. They're the arrows that point us in the right direction. So all of this I don't want to get too fussy with, and I don't want to finish out too close to the bottom part of the canvas. That level of finish will really draw your eye over here in a way that I'm just not that into. But I am into that weird little zigzag shape. I'm going to do some more of that. Okay. And I want to have some idea of like leaves and greenery. I've always been fascinated with ways that we can represent things without really specifying. Non-specific representation. Wow. It's a real skill. It's a real path to kind of go down and explore, I think, as an artist. And I don't mean like paint symbolically, like non-specifically is just a symbol of a leaf, or like, everything is just kind of signs of what you're painting. Not at all. I mean that like you're looking without overlooking, without over-explaining everything, because that's not really how people see. When you take in a scene and you focus on one area, you're really not seeing all of the detail in other areas. So as a painter, it's important to kind of remember that and sort of focus the attention of the viewer in a way similar to the experience of seeing. And that's what I think. So, all right. So now because I just mixed green. And again, if you've been here before, you might have noticed that when I start talking, especially about like the nature of seeing or what have you, I'll just start mixing colors and I'm not consciously aware of like even what I'm doing or what I'm mixing it for. But that's usually one of my best moves, I find. But I'm going to leave that color there. And for some reason, that was a green. I feel like I was going to create some sort of patterny thing through here and then work that green into here. But I'm not going to do it yet because I'm going to stick to the plan. We're going to stick to the plan. So it's just another layer of like things we need to do. It's on the to-do list. But a lot of painting really is trusting your instincts, developing a trust for your instincts, and then kind of like just honing what works and what doesn't. But a lot of it, I think people make these decisions uh, not so much consciously, myself included, but I see this a lot at the studio here. And they are very often, something that the artist will see later and say, oh, why did I do that? That's much smaller than it should be, or that's much darker than I needed to paint it. But often these changes that people make are for the good of the painting. They really do a lot for the picture. And so I think that's just like the person's intuition, just absolutely on autopilot. And we should learn how to recognize when it is working in our best interest. And then it's not always about getting everything just as it is seen. But certain times we need to make these edits and changes, and that kind of thing is somewhat intuitive, just by nature. My pear turned into a peach. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. What's really great about this is, of course, I updated this app, and my original photo reference vanished from my setup. So I just went back through like just 2 minutes before I started. It was actually late because I was finding the photo and I didn't even notice that changed from peach to pear. I must have photographed it quickly, but in real life, I'm looking at a pear. We'll get back to that reference by next week, no later. Goodness. Goodness. It moves pretty quickly around here. I think I need like a director for my my Wednesday setup. Anywho, I am not going to change. I'm definitely going to leave the pear. If I had another device that wasn't actively involved in the filming of this painting, I would take another photograph for you right now, but I'll definitely put that up. All right, so right now I'm just kind of going through, again, like chiseling away with this thin, dark mixture that is so easy to paint into. And I'm just kind of finding and describing. So finding like little visual pathways through the piece that are maybe already like pre-existing, Like I have all these brush marks that I was sort of thinking about for the branches and for Cynthia here. So now I'm sort of finding these tiny marks. They're very faint and you can take them in a lot of directions. There's no like one way to go with this. You might want to even build a little contrast behind a light mark if you want to emphasize it. And we can use this dark mixture to almost do like a light, almost like a glazing of color and information just to kind of build up edges and specific things. And I do this with the transparent mixture because I don't want my paint to be super thick that I can't paint into it anymore. So You know, if I were to use a paint that was like nice and opaque and just a big glossy brush stroke, that totally works and I can get there today, but I can't start with that and then go with this delicate edge on top of that. You have to start with the delicate first. So we're just, building up that consistency from delicate and thin and using this kind of paint technique and this painting technique as long as it's useful. Really thin, lots of turp. There's like a little bit of oil, so it's kind of like probably 75% turp. And I don't want to cover some of these things that I really like, and I don't want to change too many colors, but I do want a little bit more information. Like, for example, where's the shadow side on that grape? Let's restate that little shadow side on all these grapes. For some reason, I'm really into these grapes right now. Probably need to move around. Okay. But I do feel like this is a great use of the transparent color because it's effectively like changing things so dramatically and building them, but yet I feel like it's not destroyed what I liked about it. At this point, we are still in good shape. It's always such a, when I realized how just fleeting the things in a painting can be that you really like. Wow, you have to be so strategic about how you work back in and how you add. And I really think that's like what's so fascinating about painting in this way is what like that strategy can accomplish. It's just there's so many possibilities. So I'm thinking about the cast shadows. I'm still working transparently and thinly. And that one was way too dark. So I'm just going to lift it. I've cleaned off my brush, just a little bit of turp. Okay. And we're just lifting with the brush. I always recommend to people that instead of lifting with a rag, the brush is going to create a much nicer surface that you can work into more quickly. And if you've never painted in oil before and you're kind of like, what is this about, like consistency and like working into it? Oil paint is like, when I first started, I likened the experience to painting with like 2 sticks of butter. It was just the worst feeling. I did not take to it immediately. And I was very, very frustrated initially. And it really has been, it's not like it's always without frustration. Even now, it's a challenging material, but now I sort of understand quite a bit more about the mechanics of building a painting. And of course, there are more ways than I'm showing you here, but this is the way that I have found is really the most organized, best way, working around, using the block-in layer, thinking about the consistency, and building up the information as we build the painting layers. And it's not the only show in town by any means. There are plenty of ways to build up a painting. And maybe we can get into some other, I could like try some different hats on for painting and show you like a straight alla prima painting and talk to you about some more indirect methods of painting. But for me, this sort of uses a little bit of both alla prima and indirect. Because we can kind of use glazing and go back in these layers and change things that way. And yet I definitely like to incorporate like much more paint and a little bit more like mark making than like the maybe what you might think of as something more like an indirect or glazed painting. And I definitely encourage that. I feel like everyone has their own unique way of approaching paintings and their own taste, but often I think it is a looser approach is like what people are kind of looking for because most people like want to, I don't know, most people feel like it's easy to go really tight and focus on the detail and request to learn how to be a little bit looser with their approach. Now, whether or not you end up with a very loose painting, I think it's kind of like I'm not sure it's entirely important. I think more it's the process. And if your painting turns out to be very detailed and very rendered when you've completed this process, then that's just the way that you're naturally gravitating. So this was the green that I was looking for here earlier, you may recall. And so much of what I enjoy about painting is like finding little marks that I made in previous layers and then emphasizing those marks. And so by doing so, I can, turn these little random things that maybe I wasn't intending fully to be exactly that leaf, but I love to find things that I can like turn into the object that I'm painting. And instead of really feeling like you're just going to paint this big grouping of leaves like right on top of a pre-existing color and it's just very flat feeling. So, I feel like it can feel a little bit more like natural and woven in. And I get to use that green that I mixed up earlier. And as long as I'm thinking about this like zigzaggy kind of area through here, I'm just gonna try and build up that idea with the green. And then I also need to block in these cherries because honestly, those cherries aren't blocked in. Let's do it. I bet you knew they weren't blocked in. Just by looking, you didn't need me to tell you. But they in fact are not there. So one of the rules about painting is you kind of want to see the piece develop like a Polaroid. Everything is there from the moment you take the shot, right? The picture is there and it just develops naturally and all over at the same time at an even pace. Focusing for a moment because I need a clean red. Not that red. All right, so leaving behind an object, an area, compositional idea that you kind of know it's there and you'll get to it later. I did that so much when I was starting out. I just would really focus more on like one area of the picture. And I feel like it's not impossible to create a very cohesive artwork at the end with it, but it sure changes the process from like more predictable and enjoyable to a little bit like more chaotic and less predictable, much less predictable. And I just feel like, one of the things is that you have to, when you kind of work that way, everything has to develop up to the level of the object that you're focused on. And so you get like kind of locked in to like a style and a look and a direction for your piece that you do not get locked into when you work more gradually. So that's the thing is that like I feel like you have less work to do. I'm going to really sell you on this idea. Everything works perfectly and it's going to be amazing, guaranteed. Not necessarily, but it does feel like style wise, you end up with a much more, it's not as labored. It feels a little bit more spontaneous. Best case scenario, they don't all work. No one can tell you that every painting is going to work. And there are so many that, you can recycle, paint over, um, use as a doorstop, whatever you want. It's not really about like everyone has to be beautiful. In fact, I'll tell you something else. I often think to myself that if, I've done a painting that really didn't work or I'm not loving it or something, maybe it's just I kind of lost interest or lost the vision for it. That's what often happens to me. Like I'll sort of have like this initial vision and then it just kind of, maybe it goes off track and I'm like, well, gosh, what was I doing here? I feel like there is a finite amount of those that I have to produce in life. And you just think, okay, well, that's another one off the list and moving on. So I don't know. That helps me kind of refocus and get into the next one. But they don't all work. Not every painting works, in my opinion. Now, when I was in school, I would often hear teachers talking about their paintings that didn't work. And I really thought the painting that they thought didn't work was like amazing. So it is, of course, a very subjective thing, but really the artist is the ultimate authority of what works and what doesn't work. Because it is all about intention. And I think maintaining the intention, balancing that with like experimenting and kind of seeing where it takes you, it's super fun, but it can get a little bit confusing. So the bottom line is, I feel that it is always about your initial vision for it and having a really strong one. So one of the exercises that I try to do when I think of it and that I think is really helpful is before you start a painting, of course, doing the compositional sketches and studies like we did at the very beginning, but also just like trying to imagine it as a finished piece. And even now, I could stop and spend, I'm not going to because how boring would that be? But I could stop and spend like 20 minutes just sitting there staring at the painting and really thinking about like, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What's working? Oh, and ask yourself what's working. There's so much negativity about like, this is terrible about my painting. And of course, that's the first thing anybody's going to, focus on. But I think personally, it's a lot more fun if you can direct your attention to maybe what's working and do more of that instead of thinking like this isn't working and I have to fix it. I was just learning about some like sports psychology um, that, it's pretty straightforward, basic theory here that, you're going to have more success saying, I'm going to do great at this activity rather than I am not going to mess up this activity. Right. So thinking about it in the positive, looking at like what strengths your painting has and kind of thinking more about that, or at least balancing all of the critique that you're going to naturally be giving yourself with like, okay, this is working. Try to maintain what's working. Alrighty. So blah, 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 blah. Let's see what else. And I want to get into this little background area. I might do a little bit more of the blossoms here just to, so pretty. All right, I love that for the background color, but that will keep. It is not going to dry up. It is oil paint. So while I still have just a little bit of clean, um, no, that pear did not. But it's going to be a pear. It's going to have to be painted. That pear is going to have to get used to sitting there. So I will definitely update the photograph. That's so funny, of course. Of course, I find the wrong photograph. All righty. Okay. And what I was doing was yellow. Here we go. Oh, and if you could just take a quick moment and subscribe to this channel, it would be so helpful if you have not already. And if you could like this video too, that would be really great. Leave a comment if you can. It definitely helps the videos go farther, and that would be much appreciated. So thanks a lot. And thanks for being here. I started this kind of thing just because, you know, when I teach classes at the studio, I find that, I mean, what I really want to do is focus on the student working and the, you know, idea of demonstrating. It doesn't so much fit in the structure of my classes. They're not entirely painting classes per se. We have lots of students doing lots of different things, and they get individual help on everything, and we all sort of learn from that process. But to do a specific demonstration isn't always possible, although it happens briefly, but certainly not for like an hour. So I thought I would just kind of add this to my schedule as like a weekly supplemental thing for classes and just in general. And I'm totally open to, like, if anybody has requests or specific image or type of picture or question, do feel free to leave that in the comments or email me or what have you, or yell it really loud. All right, so I am just mixing up like the brightest yellow that I can, and I'm going to take a little bit of this mixture 50-50 medium here is what I'm going to call that. And because that's what it is, it's 50% linseed oil and 50% Gamsol. And we've got this fairly giant, but actually lovely quality brush, delightful. And I just want to see, do I want more? Do I want more flowers? Do I want more depth, more stuff, more activity? I feel like the answer is almost automatically yes. But should it be? I don't know. I think, wow, that's bright. All right. Yeah, we're going to need some more stuff here. But we are going to need some more colors. And of course, we've got violet, purple, being the opposite of yellow. I'll just grab the ingredients from right next door. And we're just going to dull that down. And now it's just the most perfect and beautiful shadow color for yellow I've ever seen. But we can also be extra mindful of the fact that yellow is like one of the more temperamental colors you can work with, because it does not do dirty. It does, you can't get yellow dirty and like then hope to pick up more yellow and like make it look clean. Oh no. So I'm going to actually wet a brand new brush, smaller, with oil, then pick up the shadow color. And I'm going to start with the shadow color because I want to find an area like here where I want like another petal or like the depth inside the flower blossom. And then I'll come back with like the light color. And I might do some like scratchy kind of yellow, something's back there, but no one knows what it is, marks. You know the kind. And then maybe we can emphasize some of the marks. My favorite thing, of course, emphasize some of these marks from last week that are working. That was not an example of me emphasizing marks that were working last week, but it was an attempt. Let's see. I feel like I don't like this brush. All right. Or maybe it's just I don't like the way it's loaded with paint and I don't have enough paint. That's really the situation. See what happens when we don't have enough paint? We can't load the brush. And if we're using the wrong color. If we can't load the brush, we can't really make the mark. So mix more paint is the moral of that story. And then, oh, isn't it horrible when you need more paint? It's the worst. But it's true. We've just got to pause. We've got to get more paint out. These are the frustrations that, I'm just going to tell you I feel frustrated by as well. That part, when it comes to painting, and I have tried different systems and strategies over time, from like hanging up my paint tubes to, having everything handy, etc. And you win some, you lose some. I don't have that option at the moment, so I'm just kind of setting up what I can. But this isn't something that is just specific to me. I always see this when people are out of paint. They're into their picture and they're kind of like working and they don't want to squeeze out more paint. And I'm the same exact way. That is my confession to you. All right. But now look, I've done such a good job. I've gotten more yellow, 2 kinds even. So huge congrats to me. And now I am going to make more of that shadow color. So it was yellow and purple being opposite on the color wheel and existing right over here as ingredients in other mixes that we've made today. I will use that up and I will use some ultramarine blue to make a little bit more purple. There we go. And now I am going to lighten up the purple before adding it to the yellow because I don't want a super dark yellow. I just want like a muted yellow. I don't want to change the value of the yellow. I want to change the saturation. That changed the value a little bit, but I'm fine with that. But that's why I lightened this first. I lightened the purple before I added it to the yellow. All right. And in case I have not mentioned, I believe it is accurate to say that about 80% of your time is spent mixing your paints and on your palette and loading your brush and doing all of that prep work so that you can make those marks. And that is totally normal and like should be accepted as par for the course as soon as possible. And it will make your life feel less like, oh, it's just so tedious and oh, I just want to be here, painting. Because a lot of times that's what people feel, and that's what I feel too. But really, you're not supposed to be doing that. It is just fine and totally right that you should be spending more time prepping and thinking about what you're going to do and making sure you have the plan and the right color. I want some really low contrast. I'm going to go even darker, more purpley, a little like the background color is in this one now. Let's see if that can do something nice. Is it too gray? It might be. I like it. It does like a very, like almost like a pattern that you're just going to see if you look at it. And then let's see if we can put this elsewhere. I believe I can. Okay. It so happens that I think it works beautifully in the small glass bottle as well. And now I'm going to go back to my original idea. And we're just going to continue making some. Wow, those 2 colors together. Wow, wow, wow. They're just kind of magical. Sometimes you put these colors together that are just like, wow, how can they look so just different shades of mud on the palette and then you put them on your canvas and they're like completely convincing in creating a description of like depth and everything you're seeing. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking a slightly darker background color and I'm trying to emphasize some of those light marks that I made last week by just painting the background like right up to the edge and maybe a little bit darker so that we really get a pop of contrast. I want that handle to be like, or not handle, spout, to be in a shadow back there. Too dark, and I kind of knew that was going to be too dark, but that's okay. Yeah. I put a lighter color over it, and now it's not that dark. All right, back to the yellow. How easily one moves out into a whole new area of the picture and then just kind of forgets what you're doing in the first place. But it actually is, I mean, a little bit of that, I'm joking, is kind of like by design. It's fine. You want to move around and you want to like kind of bring these colors and not zone into one area. Create some harmony. Mm-hmm. So yellow is a challenging color to work with. And for this, I've gotten like a second brush, and this is my light brush. And I am so sorry that you guys are looking at a peach. I'm looking at a pear. I'm just gonna paint this into the pear. But like I said, I'll definitely change that for next time. And I did just paint a color that I completely did not intend to paint, and that's fine. Maybe it's going to be amazing. Who knows? But let's leave it for now. We'll just let that set up for a quick second. Next to it, use even more yellow. All right. And this way we're getting a little more real estate covered and filled in today. And I don't want to use like entirely the same yellow, but they're pretty close in real life. So I'm kind of even now thinking about the edge of that pear turning. I don't want to have it like this razor sharp edge. That's not going to really work for getting that to turn back into the background and occupy that space of like where I'm suggesting that it is on the canvas, right? Like we need convincing edges that sort of show like it's turning away from us, not that that edge is super flat right up against the viewer's plane of sight. So we don't want to have things feeling cut out. A soft edge that just kind of breathes back into the background is often pretty effective. And we'll just kind of a little bit more of this covered and then kind of reassess. I see so much red reflected back up into the yellow here. And I have this little blue mark I really like. And I'm just going to use like almost the exact same color as like the background cloth because that's really what's reflecting. And for some reason, I really like that. So I will leave it. Okay, so now I'm going to deal with this unintentional mark. We'll see if we can't make that like a Bob Ross, like their happy accident, you know, or whatever. I don't know what that means, but you know. I get like copyright infringement. All right, so a little bit of a plane change. We can kind of use that color. And I just love how oil paint, you can just, whoops, build it up. And build it up. All right, so it has a lot of form and volume. The shape is, yeah, pretty good. Maybe a little clean up here. Now, of course, that's very linear. We don't want linear. Gotta break that up. And at the same time, why don't we just kind of emphasize some of those little background lights and darks? Okay, so we're kind of correcting the shape. We don't want to leave anything else terribly far behind. Let's just step back for a second. I mean, more or less, like it's pretty even. I have like 7 more minutes, it seems. So we should probably just focus here and then maybe here and here if we like at all can. But oh wait, we have yellow green things that little. We're already so close to one quick little color that's not like visually super duper important, but let's do it anyways because we're so close to the color. And it's very efficient if you just think to yourself, like, what exactly is it that I would need to do to change this color into the next one that I need? Sometimes that efficiency, you know, like you leave it for the next week or the next session. Like, oh, why did I leave that? I'm now I'm remixing the exact same color that I had last week. And again, we're doing this kind of yellow green little berry situation, I guess. And purple being the shadow color, and a little bit of a red purple at that, to kind of bring in and give that color just what it needs to be a shadow color. And light against dark is kind of what I'm going for, just to build up the form. I'll probably put in that little, you know, detail. The berry detail. And more than, you know, I'm making these look round and realistic or like whatever, I'm just kind of trying to think like placement. So it has this like nice little arcing, you know, I don't want to just put them all vertical or something, or, you know, it's got to be like the most important aspect is kind of how it is cascading, placed in this piece, even more than the roundness. But I want it to look round also. What I really, really want is for that balance to be right. Okay. I think that's okay for now, but it just brings up like a million ideas that as soon as I did that, I was like, now there's this and everything's so left and right. But we still have the handle of the teapot, which I now feel like is an immediate, like, I have to see this color on there because it's just going to be exactly what either, you know, makes it just as a nice light kind of tan color or breaks it. We'll see. So exciting. And consistency of the paint. Let's address it. Let's not panic. It's going to be fine. Nobody panic. We're just going to take this little oil. I got just a little bit of turp on the brush. We're just going to see some yellows in the brush, but that should be okay. Let's start with this darker of the two colors that I made. That'll be the easier one to sneak on here without kind of shocking everything because it's going to be very different. We're essentially going over like a dark purple with a light tan. And I just want to see it like visually. I think it's going to be okay. It looks so yellow, because I'm putting it on that dark purple. So I'm going to just tone this down a lot and make this with more magenta in it. And the magenta is on this dark, in this color scheme. Look at that. Now, if you can't see that from your camera angle, just that little color difference, it just made it from like it hurts my eyes to look, like, that's very nice. And it's sitting in there and all is well. So putting in a little complementary color, it's kind of like I said to someone, I think this week, that without a little bit of the compliment, that color is like texting in all caps. It's just, it's a lot. It's kind of like slow your roll color. Let's just all take a step back. So, put a little purple in that yellow and it won't be quite as intolerable. And it's like a very like warm kind of yellowy. It's very, very mellow. You could barely call it yellow. But as soon as you put it on the canvas, it really pops. And that is at the muted level that it currently is. I don't want like a big giant yellow bridge between this element and this element. If I am going to take that up a notch, I'm going to do that gradually. That's not going to be something that I like have to look at and then tone down. Goodness, no. There to see that color. All right. Just tone it down with the compliment as a good rule of thumb. It's not always, the answer. It's just everything should be a little simplified, but it's a great place to start. So definitely if you're finding or you think that like looking back at your pictures, if color feels like it's too much or it's not feeling like sophisticated, start just by toning it down. Because I think this is a very, very colorful looking painting, but when you really get into what each color is, there's very few that are full strength. Okay. I really want to finalize a little bit more about the color of that teapot. I'm going to take this color and cool it down with this green that I used for some of the leaves and the background. So same color from the handle, a little bit of white, and a cool color that I've used elsewhere in the picture. Now you might call it mud, but I think this is the way to go. The power is in the grays. This is what Robert Henri talks about in The Art Spirit. I was going to say. Because it's true. We have to gray things down for them to be effective. Not everything can be full strength. I love this color. I'll tell you why. It's showing up as like just a little bit yellow next to what I have and next to the purple. And so I feel like this is another opportunity to kind of tie things together. And that's going to kind of solve my problem of like yellow here and yellow there. And I didn't want to make that obvious of a bridge. I want to think about like the pattern. And I love that peach color, and actually breaking that up with this almost more yellowy green color is making that peach color really shine, in my opinion. And now I'm going to go more peach. Probably too peach. Okay. Wow. Fun. That's a really fun color. And I very much enjoyed the weird random paint mark that I had on that brush. Oh, symmetry. Not sure I was born with a natural ability to achieve and create symmetry, but you know, it's important to stop and assess and turn that painting upside down if you can't see it anymore. I've cooled down the color. Very green. Really using a super small brush because I want to make marks that can like eventually, and by eventually I mean, you know, really soon, look like the pattern that I am seeing on this beautiful teapot that I've painted multiple times. So I'm kind of like, just like I did with other layers, I'm starting to think about that pattern, maybe indicate it a little bit, but I'm kind of like sidling up to it. I'm not coming at this pattern like head on, like, you know, here we go. We're going to draw in the pattern. I'm just trying to make marks that could be the pattern one day. I'm kind of going from like warm to cool, and I probably do have to wrap this little session up, but we're going to finish what I'm doing right now. And then, so marks that could be a pattern, you know, this works for a variety of things. Even in like greenery, it's too overwhelming to, you know, start out drawing every little item. And the end result is often somewhat, you know, overseen, overworked, right? We want like a little bit more alluded to and not seen. I think that's what people respond to. So see if you can't, in some way, start to like identify a pattern or like a group of marks could be a something. That's kind of how I think about starting. A group of marks could be a something. So all that and sage advice too. All right, so I'm gonna just I don't know, keep going for like 1 minute because I really like this color. All right, well, I'm hearing the stuff going on outside, so I'm gonna probably go ahead and wrap this up for today. But I feel like we got some progress, and if you have any questions, let me know. I am going to, as far as the plan is now, I will be here next week to continue this picture. And then I will be off the following week as I will be involved in a plein air painting event. So stay tuned for more on that. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's see if I can quickly. No, apparently I cannot say goodbye to you because my camera is gone, but I will wave at you through Palette Cam, and I will say I will see you next week. Thank you guys so much for being here, and please come back next time.